Today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, PJ Washington has something to say. Is Mark Williams an untouchable starter? I'll ask David Walker all these questions and more from the Sicko Satchel. That's today on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
Welcome in. This is Locked On Hornets. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and daily wherever you get podcasts, and that includes YouTube, where you can see me, Doug Branson. You can find my work on everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can see David Walker wearing a Franklin Barbecue t-shirt from Austin, Texas, a Max Flight.
Yeah.
What would you call that hat?
This is a visor, Doug.
A visor.
This is not a hat. It's a visor. It's visor season. When I was on with Walker and Wes and Walker, I pitched. I said they asked me what gear should they grab from the golf course, and I said, take it old school, take it traditional, bring back the golf visor. So it's golf visor season.
Is a visor's not a hat?
I'm
pretty sure a visor is a hat.
Is this like a hot dog is a sandwich type of conversation we're having now?
I feel like we're opening a can of worms here, but I think a visor is a hat. Anyway, that's David Walker.
A hat has to have cover the top of the head.
Okay, listen. My definition of a hat is something that he would settle this debate. Walker is on vacation. He can't settle this debate. You will see Walker later this week because we did do some pre-tapes and talked about some evergreen stuff. So you're going to hear from Walker this week. But right now, you're seeing me if you're watching on YouTube, and I can't help but address the elephant in the room right now if you are watching on YouTube, and that is this. I am not wearing a hat today. Also, I've cut my hair. It is short now, and I know the question is, why did you do it? That's always going to be the question. Yes. David was shocked when he saw it this morning. And the answer is this: it's not because I have a job interview. This is my job. I can show you my show you my bank statements or lack thereof. This is my job, talking about the Hornets. It's not because of a job interview. It is not because it's the summer. It's very simple, David. It's because I promised the listeners of this podcast that if the Hornets made the playoffs this upcoming season, that I would shave my head, which I'm upgrading slightly to a crew cut. I will take my hair away. I'm not going to go bald. I'm not going to go bald for this reason, David, because I just felt my head the other day, and I have a sneaking suspicion that I would be one of those people that shaved their head bald, and I would have a wrinkly head. People discover that, and they have like a weirdly shaped head. That would totally be me. I felt it. I felt the ridges, I'm pretty sure. Now, producer Katie says everyone has ridges. I think that I have deep ridges and that my head would look weird. So I'm not going to shave it. I'm going to go crew cut if they make the playoffs, not the play-in. So the reason I cut my hair was simple. I wanted this to be a sloping transition. I did not want it to go from the long hair. Also, you know what? I can do whatever I want to with my hair. I don't view myself as a personal brand. I am who I am, whether I have long hair or not. And I don't appreciate the way you're looking at me right now, David. I'll just say that right now. You're judging me.
I'm judging you. For everyone that's not currently on YouTube. Everyone that's not currently on YouTube, go pull it up on YouTube. Go take a look at this new do. I applaud it. I think it's great. Have you found now? Here's my question. You haven't gotten a haircut since you lived in Nashville?
It's been a long time. Yeah, I had long hair while I was still in Charlotte. It's been a long time.
And so the search process for a barber or someone to cut it, was that extensive? Was that just somewhere you passed every day? Maybe.
It's proximity. There's one in walking distance to me. It's called the Beauty Parlor, and I said, "A walking distance, deal."
Yep.
And they made me beautiful. I'll have to say they did great work. Okay, enough about my hair. Because it can't be great listening for the podcast, folks, although it is a great way to promote the YouTube channel. Like, if you want to go see it, you got to go, and while you're there, subscribe and like videos. Speaking of judging, people are judging, a lot of Hornets fans are judging PJ Washington right now because he was doing some kind of live video. I'm not sure if it was X or TikTok or whatever it was, but Tyler Herro made a comment on on some kind of live video that essentially was, how did you go from the Hornets, insinuating the Hornets are the bottom, to the NBA Finals, being the top. And I mean, from what I've seen from the video, PJ Washington just laughed at that, maybe made some kind of like comment that I didn't really hear. But it has gotten under certain people's crawl, I'll say. I was on Mac and Bone this morning on WFNZ, and it was the first question. Yeah, I just dropped that casually, right? Move from, I mean, no offense to Wes and Walker, but, the morning show is the morning show. So I was on Mac and Bone, and the first question they asked me, David, was about this PJ Washington thing, which surprised me because you've got draft, you got free agency, you got Miles Bridges. What are they going to do there? And still yet people are talking about when Terry Rozier goes to the Miami Heat and talks junk about the Hornets, Kelly Oubre goes to the Philadelphia 76ers and has things to say about the culture. This really gets at people. And David, you had some interesting thoughts on this, on the state of the fan base, and what it means when they sound off on PJ Washington like this.
Yeah, I just think, there's a bit of a tussle, a little battle for the soul of the Hornets collective fan base right now. And it's tough because look, man, I'm not going to lie. Like when the first thing you see when you open up whatever social media, account you have is PJ celebrating in the locker room and, laughing, saying from the bottom to the top and flashing over to Gafford. And he was in Washington, of course, so they can share a little bit of that. And like, good for you. You put a little context around it because it was Tyler Herro, kind of dropping that in the comments. How do you go from Charlotte to it's pretty easy, Tyler. You might want to get familiar with how trades work. Just saying, it's part of Heat culture down there. So if you don't know, he was traded. That's how it happened.
And how role players work. How role players work, right? I mean, this was my point on Mac and Bone that like PJ Washington fundamentally as a player did not change from Charlotte to the Mavericks. It's just that they've surrounded him with, Kyrie Irving. They've surrounded him with Luka Doncic, with players that can play and that command attention, getting him more open looks and more opportunities to do things in the open floor than he had to consistently do that in Charlotte. And so, yes, he's going to go to the finals, not because PJ Washington all of a sudden elevated his game or that there was something that Charlotte was doing necessarily to hold him down, except be injured and not add sort of backstops and depth and players. I mean, that's, but this is how I think people are reacting to this, which is like, and I think it's the same way they reacted to the the Terry Rozier stuff and the Kelly Oubre stuff, which is this. How dare they not say something while they were here to try to change the culture? It's easy to say it when you go to Dallas. It's easy to say it when you go to Miami. It's much more difficult to do that as a player in front of cameras or to the newspaper while you're here and make some trouble here to make things better here because you were part of that culture. Whether you want to criticize it or not, you were part of that. Okay? Right. But on the other hand, I think people also say, they kind of have a point about the Hornets culture.
Yeah. That's the thing. When it keeps happening and people keep saying it once they leave here, like that's when you do have to look inwardly and as the organization as a whole. And that's where you have to feel like, look, there's obviously something to some of this, right? There's obviously something that's not clicking when people are here. There's obviously something that they did not do aside from not being able to put a competitive product on the court, right? I think that I was trying to remember back. I don't think I think Kemba had pretty good things to say when he left here.
Or nothing. I think a lot of people left here and had nothing. I mean, Lynn going to Brooklyn, Big Al, retiring. Right. I mean, and Big Al, I think, did an interview with us and did an interview with radio when he was going on Big Three, doing his Big Three thing, and had nothing but good things to say about There was a time when they were making the playoffs, when this organization did have its bleep together a little bit. It wasn't ready to be elite, but it did have its stuff together. And then I think post that playoffs and not reinvesting in that team, that was the beginning of MJ's detachment. And what filled the gap of that detachment was not like more expertise or more investment. And so that's why, to me, this whole talk of PJ actually matters because it hits at a central point, which is that the biggest thing that the Hornets as an organization top down have to work on this offseason, not going to solve it this offseason, But what they have to work on is changing the narrative, because the most interesting thing about that PJ Washington video was not PJ Washington. It was Tyler Herro, somebody that we've talked about adding to this Hornets roster, but that's his perception of the Hornets as an organization. And players around the league I don't think they pay close enough attention to go, well, the Hornets, they changed ownership group, and now MJ's not as big a part of it, and now they also have a new GM. Like, no, they don't pay attention to that. All they know is Hornets, they lose, they get injured, they don't, I've heard from Terry Rozier, I've heard from Caleb Martin, I've heard from all these guys about what kind of stuff they do there. And so that's the reputation. They have to change that. That's the biggest, we can talk about free agency, we can talk about trades, and all that stuff matters, but fundamentally, they've got to work on changing the narrative.
Yeah, and I can't be mad at anyone that's that's sensitive to that or that's annoyed by the comments that have come out. The problem is now, or the tough part to take is now, it's like over the last year, it's been one after the other, right? The Oubre thing, then Terry, and now PJ, and in reality, it's like a flash in the pan. It's a one morning thing that stings, and if I'm not going to tell any Hornets fan to not take offense by that, I guess, or not be annoyed by that, because it's just been so long since they've been able to celebrate much of anything. It's just been injury after injury, losing season after losing season. Sure, they were in the play-in, but that's even seems like forever ago. And so the Hornets fans are struggling right now. It's like, geez, you got to kick us while we're down. You got to, why can't you celebrate be Dallas, have fun with that? And kind of, let the bygones be bygones. But so I get that. I totally get that from Hornets fans. And at the same time, the ire obviously should be directed at, the new regime. Who's in the building now? What are we going to do? Is this going to be a new kind of outwardly facing messaging that this group is going to have? Because that's been the big frustration with me in the past. It's like, we don't hear much of anything about anything. And it's like there's a bubble around the building almost. You got to keep guessing at what their thoughts are, what their direction is. And so that'll be interesting for me to see, because I don't think it's going to be a one-season turnaround. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I'm not sure that's going to change.
That's a bold take.
Over the course of the next 10 or 12 months. So, but look, man, it's as Hornets fans, there's nothing you can do but be a little ticked off and sit here and be like, oh, I guess, man, just move on and be happy. Be happy with your Western Conference, championship, and good luck to you. Good luck in the finals.
You mentioned the bubble. That kind of takes me perfectly into the next segment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Yeah, well done.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
The Hornets bubble around the draft process actually getting a little tighter. I've got that and a mock draft coming up for David in just a moment here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Hornets podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and, the best part, for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Welcome back here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. So thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. David, you mentioned that the Hornets fan base doesn't have much to hang on to. They were in a couple of play-ins, but it's almost worse because they got mud stomped in those play-ins, right?
Yeah.
It almost somehow, I really can't define this. I can't really back this up. But somehow I think it would be better if the Hornets had not gone to those play-in games and not gotten mud stomped. Because it's the Schrodinger's cat sort of thing where, like, you don't know. It's like, man, if the Hornets just got into a play-in, I think they could really do some damage. They could kind of sneak in there. But you have a little bit of evidence that they get into a postseason and crap the bed a little bit. They've got to overcome all of those things. Luckily, the one thing that they didn't have was Brandon Miller. And I think that's where you can hang a lot of hope on Brandon Miller and some of these trade assets that they've brought in. But they've got to do some work in this upcoming draft as well, whether they make the pick at 6 or they trade back for additional assets. This is an important draft. And you were mentioning that the bubble around the organization, what they've said about their future plans, getting tight, the coaching process, the coaching hire process was a bit of a black box, but it resulted in, I think, what everyone consensus thought was the right hire in Charles Lee. But the bubble is getting tighter around the draft process. This coming to us from James Plowright from SI and at British_Buzz on Twitter. He says, Hornets draft update. Charlotte's new management have opted against publicly listing their pre-draft workouts or allowing media access as done so in past years. This has become more frequent league-wide in recent years with Jeff Peterson, his previous team, Brooklyn, having the same policy. David, what do you think about this? Fair or foul, not making this draft process more available to the public?
Selfishly, obviously, it's annoying. But, it's like Plowright said there, it's becoming a little more common practice across the NBA. So if that's what they want to do, knock yourself out. I think the only thing that ultimately we care about is they make the right pick or they make the right moves to improve the team. It's a little, content-wise, obviously, it stinks. I feel like some of this stuff gets leaked out, though, here and there. You get rumors or stuff, or we know some people that will not work out for them. So, you can kind of do your own homework there. I don't know how much, how many years did we go through this and read the list of people they're working out? And, I guess there could be some surprises here and there, but they've drafted people they've not worked out before. They've certainly brought in like a ton of guys when they've had second round picks that are kind of interesting. But, that whole kind of dog and pony show of bringing the guys in and working them out, I don't know how much you can ever glean from that. In my opinion, it's stuff to talk about and it's interesting to look at, especially in a draft that we know so little about. But ultimately, if they want to do it that way, just get the right pick.
Well, listen, I think if a lot of guys decided not to work out for Charlotte this year, then it's probably in Charlotte's best interest from a PR perspective not to release that information. And you would release that information via releasing everyone else that worked out for you. People would be going, well, why didn't Stephon Castle want to work out with you? Why didn't Donovan Clingan want to work out with you? And I'm not saying that those are the names. I'm just saying that would be the perception at that point.
Right.
But also, we didn't get a ton from those interviews as a public. Those interviews with prospects were there were a lot of nothing burgers. Although I will say this, and it's the same thing that I said when the owners came out and started taking a little bit of credit for the trade process that brought in Mann and brought in Poku and brought in Grant Williams. Be careful. Because if you take credit and if you put things behind a curtain, it's all great as long as you're getting it right. As long as Trey Mann comes in and plays well and Grant Williams comes in and plays well and you make a draft pick and that draft pick ends up being a stellar pick, it's all great. But if you start messing that stuff up and there's been no transparency and you've taken and you want to put this image out there of ownership being involved, what are fans going to immediately do? They're going to jump on it. They're going to say, this is your fault. You're to blame. And because they don't know. And I say this all the time on the show. When you don't, as an organization, when you don't develop a narrative to put out there, then people will develop their own narratives.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will do that anyway. And then it's a kind of clash of narratives. But if you don't say anything, if you put everything behind a curtain, then you sort of have to live with the perception and you have to bet it all on you getting really everything right. Because as you said, David, it's not going to be one decision that turns this thing around. They've got to really, if they want to get good quickly in enough time that matches the sort of timeline of Brandon Miller and of LaMelo Ball and of the things that they have now, then they've got to really string together. They don't have to be perfect, but they got to be pretty damn near perfect.
Yeah. I'm going to change my answer. I hate this. Why? Honestly, because the more you talked about that, it's like, what? So, all right, let's talk.
This is why I like having you on. I talk for a little bit and I change your minds. This is beautiful.
What's the advantage? You're just, because agents are still going to talk, right? And players are going to talk, right? So like the agents will know who's worked out here. The players will know. You'll have a group of players that work out together. Obviously, they'll know. I guess some of it could get out. Like, what's the big advantage in this? Theoretically, you're saying, well, we'll keep it all under wraps so no one will know who we really like. Is that the goal, I guess? Or is it like, just because if this is more, along the lines of a larger, we're keeping everything in house. We're not going to say anything about anything moving forward. Then that's another frustrating part about being kind of in this Hornets fan base, is that you never know what's going on.
Well, it seems like part of a larger trend in the NBA to limit media access, whether it be going to the locker rooms. They've moved that all out into sort of very carefully orchestrated little mini press conferences after games. Again, it's, if you do that, I think you're taking yourself a little bit out of the conversation for a while. So I don't know. I think there's probably positives and negatives. I think all organizations are looking for, what can we do around the margins? What can we do? What can we do that's proactive? And this is something, taking that away is something they can do that they feel like may give them just a little bit of an advantage when it comes to what they want to do with the pick. Because look, with this 6th pick, I think the Hornets do have some opportunities to trade back. And so being a mystery, not just to fans, but being a mystery to other teams about what you want to do with that pick. And I've said, honestly, they should really hype up the idea that they're going to take Bronny James with that, pick in the 40s, just so they could, get the Lakers or Phoenix biting on a possible trade opportunity. So it's very interesting. I do want to get to this mock draft that has, from CBSSports.com, latest one from them. This was 19 hours ago from David Cobb. And I'm just going to skip down to the end where the Hornets are selecting at 6. Well, let me tell you who went. Sarr at 1, Risa Shea at 2. That's boring. 3 is Stephon Castle. That's the highest I've seen him go in a while. Nikola Topic at 4. That almost seems like planted. I don't know, like 4 at Topic. I've seen that a lot with San Antonio picking Topic. Dalton Connect goes 5. So a lot of interesting opportunities here for the Hornets. They could go Holland, they could go Clingan, they could go Shepard. But Cobb has them taking Clingan at 6. And this was another thing that came up on Mac and Bone, is, do the Hornets take Clingan, even though they've made a big show, seemingly they're making a big show of Mark Williams being healthy and being a big established part of their core? Is it okay to take Clingan in this spot at 6?
It is. I mean, from everything we've heard, he would be the safest pick. I don't think fans are going to be super jazzed for that. I think, like, if Reed Shepard falls there, and as much as he's being talked up, I mean, people are talking about him measuring out, not like measurables and vertical, but like all the measuring is that he might be the best player in the draft. And he's certainly the best shooter in the draft. I think a lot of people would be clamoring for him. Now, some folks will have PTSD from Malik Monk, a Kentucky guard, falling to them, like all that stuff. But I think if Reed Shepard's there, it's going to be tough for them to pass up, because, and obviously I'm coming around on this, Doug, but like the thought of putting him in the backcourt with LaMelo is more appealing. I think the longer we go here, LaMelo can play with anybody. I think he's played with Terry Rozier. He's played with smaller guards in the backcourt there. But for Clingan, I mean, and Nada was on here last week, and he's pretty nervous about the whole Mark Williams thing. I think anybody is, until you see him go through a full season and not be hurt. So, I mean, having some security there and some backup behind Mark Williams there does make sense. It is safe. It's just not like a swing for the fences type thing.
Yeah, I'm glad they're confident in Mark Williams' health. I'm glad that Mark's confident in Mark Williams' health. I don't know that I'm super confident until I see him play a full season. That's number one. But the other thing is, too, like, with all due respect to Mark Williams, like, what has he done on the court that would establish him as, like, core or like untouchable starter. Like, I just don't understand that at all. I really hope that all of that is a little bit of a smokescreen to say that the Hornets won't take Clingan. Like, I hope that if there isn't a better opportunity, maybe Castle's a better opportunity if you can ignore the point guard stuff. Maybe Shepherd is a better opportunity because, like, it's just explosive scoring. If it's, if it's not a Malik Monk situation where he comes in and just forgets how to shoot, then Shepherd, there's a lot to love there. But if those options aren't available to you and you want to go Clingan, you should feel free to go Clingan. I just don't like it. It honestly like blows my mind when people think that like, oh, well, no, they should have deference towards Mark Williams. Why? Like, did he almost make an all-star game? Am I like crazy? Like there's stuff there, obviously, like Mark Williams has done, but why shouldn't he have to fight for his spot like everybody else? Like LaMelo made an all-star game. Shouldn't have to fight for the point guard spot. Brandon Miller shouldn't have to fight for his spot on the starting unit after scoring almost 18 points a game and looking like the best offensive weapon they have outside of LaMelo Ball. Like, shouldn't have to fight for a starting spot. But outside of that, I just don't get it.
No. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, he's going to be the safest pick, probably over 7 foot without shoes, or at least 7 feet without shoes.
And if he can shoot, which it all accounts from some of the other teams that are leaking stuff about their private workouts, it looks like this guy can shoot.
So who had Castle at 3? Was that Houston?
Houston now, but Houston is the interesting sort of fulcrum point of this draft because they're the team most rumored to be wanting to get out of that draft pick. So you're not thinking about what Houston wants, or if you're doing a mock draft, you shouldn't think about what Houston wants. You should think about some of the trade partners that they have available to them. But that, again, if somebody wants that Clingan shooting big, they might jump up there and get him. That's what's so difficult. I mean, I think 3, it seems like that Sarr and Risacher are locked at 1-2. So it would be a shock if somebody else jumped into there because we've seen so much attention around those two at 1-2. So then really the draft starts at 3 and what happens there with that trade.
Yeah. And you're going to be, Castle, Shepherd, Clingan, I guess Dillingham, and our G League guy. Well, Buzelis and Ron Holland. So that's the fun thing about this draft and intriguing thing about it is like there's going to be someone there, that you could not only just talk yourself into, but in this group that you've got to be able to find someone who can add some value to the team. And there's going to be someone there that can do that, right? I mean, at least as you talk about this draft, some of those guys could be the picks of the draft, could be the best talent available. So, and I think that's what they got to look at. But I think to your point, so when you're talking about Clingan, you're still talking about you're not drafting for fit, I don't think, right? You're still not drafting for fit because if you were, then you'd be looking for something on the wing, regardless of who's there. But like Clingan, like you said, you've got Mark Williams, but if you can add that depth and talent, like they're not drafting for fit, I wouldn't think.
Well, and this is what I said on Mac and Bone, which is like, look, centers in today's league don't play 35 to 38 minutes a night anymore unless you're Jokic, unless you're whatever, plug in the best centers in the league. Like, that's not Mark Williams. You could do a Mark, 25 and Clingan 18 or something. Like, there's ways to do it where Clingan is happy with the role and Mark is happy as starter. Like, there's just ways to do it. It's absurd to me that anyone would think or write that the Hornets absolutely cannot take a center because they've got one locked up in Mark Williams. Like, what? Give me evidence of that.
But but as Rod Boone, put out there last week, I mean, that might be the feeling though. Like the Hornets. But if that's
so what I'm saying is if that's the feeling, that is a mistake. And the Hornets have been making that mistake and tripping over that particular, issue for I don't know, since Big Al left. I mean, they've been thinking, we're good at center. It's like, no, you are not. No, you are not.
And so that's where these workouts are really going to cause a big problem because you've already heard of them having difficulty bringing guys in. Is that Clingan? Is that Castle? I mean, if they can't even get a look at them, that's where I would say, maybe.
Yeah, because again, with Clingan, if he can't shoot, if you can't get a good look at him and get an idea that if he can shoot or not, it does make it more difficult to take him because you don't You don't look, having 2 centers that can't shoot is bad. Having 3 centers that can't shoot and are due to make a lot of money because they're, lottery or right outside the lottery picks, that's going to be difficult. So yes, it's tough if he doesn't decide to work out. But the good news is we won't know it. Ignorance is bliss. And that's how I live my life. So, all right, coming up on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We've got to dig into the Sicko Satchel, and we're going to be doing that all week. I've got a question from Daniel. I've got a question from Amber. We're going to get to all that just ahead here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. This episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or you're more of a power person or you, like my hair, you just feel stylish today, then eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Final segment here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. And as promised, I'm going to rummage around this Sicko Satchel. You filled it with lots of great questions. I don't think they're silly enough. They need to be sillier. Some of these are great, serious questions, and we're going to address them. But I need sillier questions in this Sicko Satchel. I'm going to do another one later in the week, so get it ready. All right, Daniel's up first. Who is the most likely big splash, in quotation marks, big splash, trade acquisition if we start next season hot? David, big splash.
So big splash in season trade acquisition if the Hornets come out on fire.
Right. It's like, oh, these guys are looks like they're contenders.
I mean, how much of Karl Anthony Towns? How much can you take? That contract. When's the last time you looked at that contract, Doug?
Well, so what I haven't looked at it in a long time. It scares me to look at.
It's terrifying. Yeah,
it's terrifying. But that would, I think, require both a Hornets hot start and a Minnesota
Wolves slow start.
Right, because right now I think they're coming off the high. And Anthony Edwards wants more than anything to disprove the haters. He's making commercials. He's making shoe commercials that are brilliant shoe commercial by the way, of keeping receipts and wanting to answer the haters. So they're going to want to do that. But and to that point, if they don't, I think Anthony Edwards is going to look for someone to blame. And I think Rudy Gobert is definitely a someone that might catch some of that, and Karl Anthony Towns would be as well. So if it starts off poor for Minnesota, then I think absolutely that's a name. You know, this is going to be the boring name. I don't know if this is big splash, but Mikal Bridges. I think Brooklyn is intent on keeping Mikal and seeing how that goes. If it doesn't go, then I think they are going to be in more of a fire sale mode. And so, then the Hornets will, theoretically, if they trade back, they'll already have a number of assets, but if they trade back, they could have even more. So I think that could be a name as well.
And they'll have to compete with a lot of people for that Mikal Bridges. I think. I mean, he's the popular name that's kind of running around there as to who can Team X add, right? Like a lot of people, I don't think there'll be as many suitors for Towns just because of Towns and his Townsness and his his contract, which is terrifying. But and I'm not saying the Hornets should do that, but they would certainly be adding some talent on a night in, night out basis.
Yeah, I think they'll be in a lot of competition if they want to make the move during the draft or, that time when there's going to be a lot of people wanting to make moves in a lot of different directions. And so we'll see how disciplined Brooklyn is about seeing out. I mean, they say they want to see that plan out. When push comes to shove and you've got Joe Dumars with two phones in his ears, That's when we're really going to see how dedicated they are. But if Mikal survives that, and we're talking about in-season trade, before the trade deadline, then, maybe they could go out and overpay a little bit or over move out assets to get Mikal Bridges if they really believe. And that to me, and we don't really talk about this a lot, but like there's a huge question mark around the Hornets of, are they rebuilding or are they in, let's see what we have early in the season and then look to win now? Or are they sort of dedicated to like, no, we're going to shed some money. We're not going to bring back Bridges. We're going to look to try to fill that gap with a cheap alternative until, we want to make our big move. Yeah. Because they haven't said anything, we just don't know. So
yeah. And I think you're talking draft now, but you look towards that draft next year, and even after a guy like Cooper Flagg, who is number one pick right now, but who knows what's going to happen, like that, there's so much talent in that draft. It's going to be really hard for them not to say, all right, let's just take it slow and low for one more season, try and add what we can, and hopefully get, a high draft pick and add a real blue blood star talent next year. But, I guess we got a long way to go till we get to that point.
Final question here from Amber. Summer silliness is here, and I want to know how this new regime can change how players see this place as a free agent destination. Is it as simple as winning games? Because Big Al was our only significant free agent signing in the last 10 years, and that was after the Mike Dunlap 21-win season. Thank you, Kimball Walker, by the way. What else, in addition to winning, will help us?
No, I mean, just like we talked about, dude, and y'all talked about it last week, they've got to spend some money. And they've got to upgrade these facilities. They've got to upgrade the player experience. We don't hear too much about that ever, unless it's something like Terry leaving, Oubre leaving. But by the way, Oubre did want to stay here. Now I know he wanted a deal. He wanted a contract, so of course he wanted to stay here. And I love the Kelly Oubre experience. But you've got to change it. You've got to pull a full blown Mark Cuban. And put PS5s in the lockers. Put the big screen, put the big screens on the walls. Figure out some ergonomic design for all the chairs. Like, do all this stuff. They're putting all this money. They're adding another VIP bar area underneath. It's for the fans. Yes, they've got to do that stuff for the fans, but they've got to make players, feel like they are wanted and they are valued and they're doing the right thing around here. And hopefully Peterson and the new regime will be able to do that, but we just don't get that much insight into it. We don't hear about the new facilities. We don't hear about the new locker room or the new training staff or the whatever. Like the perception, to your point, Doug, is the perception of a losing franchise. And until guys leave here and have great things to say about it, or they start winning, that's not going to change.
Yeah, and like going back to an old logo or, all this nostalgia stuff, it doesn't even, it only does things for a small and getting smaller subset of the fan base that remembers those times. And also it doesn't do anything to recruit new players because these new players weren't even born. There are players in the league now that did not exist, that were not part of this planet the last time the Hornets won a playoff series. There are players, right? I have a couple players on this team that have never been in a world where that happened. So none of that matters. It is all to what you say. It's that, but it's also, I'll add one more thing. It's getting more guys like Brandon Miller. It's getting more guys like Grant Williams that can bring an attitude and that maybe have not just been sort of exposed as much, that don't buy into the image of the Hornets, that really want to come here and relish the opportunity to change it. There's players in the league that want to go to a team that already has an established culture and thrive in that. And then there are players that relish the opportunity to create a culture. I think that's Grant Williams to a T. I think that's why Grant Williams had problems in his other stops, is because maybe he went into cultures that were a little bit more established and had that attitude, and people were like, buddy, slow your roll. But it's perfect for the Hornets. So go out and find a couple more guys like that and let them be your ambassadors. That's what's got to happen.
The good news is it's a blank slate. I mean, really, you could do whatever you want to at this point, and
you got to open the Sky Mall budget. You got to open the Sky Mall magazine and find the vibrating chairs and the gadgets and the gizmos and just like, and look, you have to do it because you're asking fans to pay more. So if you're asking fans to pay more, that money has got to go to both things that will benefit fans, but also things that will benefit players, so that you have that image around the league. Great points.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Good show. It's fun. It's wonderful.
Oh man, I'm
Walker,
glad I got to see on the premiere haircut show, dude.
Well, it's going to be.
I didn't know about it.
I know. I didn't tell you. I didn't give you the heads up. The hair's up. But what's going to be weird is that like my hair's going to change on the YouTube channel on and off because we did these pre-tapes, pre-haircut. So you're just people are going to be very confused tomorrow. I can't wait. And Walker's going to be back next week, but you're going to hear some of his takes. Nada's going to be back later in the week. You got a big week here as we continue to break down this offseason. I'm sure we're going to get some kind of rumors. Like, we're not going to know from the team who they're working out, but through these mock drafts, through the reporting that Woo and these other guys are doing, we are going to get more information about what's happening, and we'll bring it to you all here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. So thanks for tuning in. We're on every day. We're on every weekday. And for David, for Walker, for Nada, for the whole family here, I'm saying go Hornets, go America. Let's swarm Charlotte. See you tomorrow.